Good evening. Welcome to JazzTalk, an education program from the Center for the Performing Arts. I'm Julia, and I'm the Director of Education and Community Engagement. Now, we know how popular Miss Stacey Kent is because we have folks joining us from all over the world. We have folks registered from the United Kingdom, the Philippines, Israel, and from multiple states. So I'm going to guess that some of you have not had a chance to visit our lovely center in person. So I want to take just a minute to tell you a little bit more about us. We are located just north of Indianapolis, Indiana, in the beautiful city of Carmel. And our campus actually has 3 theaters. We have the Palladium, which is our 1,600 seat concert hall, which is where Stacy's going to be performing later in March. And then across the green space, we have the Tarkington, our 500 seat proscenium arch theater, and the Studio, our small black box theater. We have 6 resident companies, and we present artists from all over the world in multiple genres. We're so lucky to have this beautiful performing arts center right in the heart of Indiana. Now, we know how popular Miss Kent is and that you all love her, and you're all going to have lots of questions for her. And we can't wait to get to those questions. We're going to hold those off a little bit, though, later till the end, but you don't have to wait to ask those questions. If you're joining us on Zoom, if you don't mind, please use the Q&A function. If you want to test it out right now, just put your cursor over the bottom of the screen and you'll see a little Q&A pop up. You can post them in the chat, but it's really easier for us to manage them if you post them in the Q&A. If you're joining us on Facebook, post your questions in the comments section and we'll get to those as well. Now, with that being said, I want to tell you a little bit about our guests tonight. Our host is Todd Williams. He's a sought-after saxophonist, clarinetist, flautist, and clinician. He is known for his work with the Wynton Marsalis Quintet, Septet, and Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. Todd is the Assistant Professor of Music Education at Indiana Wesleyan University, where he directs the Jazz Ensemble and Jazz Combo. And he recently received his Doctorate of Music Education from Indiana University's Jacobs School of Music. A former music director of Times Square Church in New York, he has penned a variety of contemporary gospel choral works, including the international favorite, We Proclaim Him. He has toured the world, playing venues from the White House to Carnegie Hall to the Hollywood Bowl, and has appeared with such artists as Harry Connick Jr., John Hendricks, Terrell Stafford, Marcus Roberts, Slide Hampton, and Christian McBride. Todd is a 4-time recipient of ASCAP's Plus Award for Composers. Now, our other special guest is none other than Stacey Kent, jazz singer in the mold of the greats with a legion of fans worldwide, a host of honors, including a Grammy nomination, album sales in excess of 2 million, and gold and platinum selling #1 albums. Stacey's musical journey began in her childhood with piano lessons. A keen ear and a true voice led her to search out opportunities to express her love of music. As a comparative literature graduate with a passion for music, Stacey traveled to Europe to further her studies. And after receiving her degree, and through a series of twists of fate, she found herself in London, where she enrolled in a graduate music program at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. It was in London that she met her future husband and musical partner, Jim Tomlinson. Kent paid her dues in the jazz clubs of London, and before releasing the first of a series of albums on the Candide label. Albums and awards followed, with Stacey winning the Jazz Vocalist of the Year at the BBC Jazz Awards. Stacey's repertoire is extremely diverse and includes a number of songs written for her by her husband with various lyricists, most notably the Nobel Prize-winning author Kazuo Ishiguro. Stacey continues to pursue a frenetic recording and touring schedule. And we are thrilled, as I said, to be presenting her on March 20th in the Palladium. And tonight, we're also very fortunate to have her husband, Jim Tomlinson, joining us as well. So Stacey and Jim and Todd, please join us. We are excited to talk to you all and hear your words of wisdom tonight.
Greetings, greetings. Hello, hello.
Hello. I'm going to turn off my camera now and let you guys get started. And everybody, please remember, post those questions in the Q&A.
Thanks
All
for
right. Stacey and Jim, good to see you all. How are you doing?
How are you,
Good, thanks.
Todd? We're
Great to
good.
see you.
Awesome. Great. Doing great. Well,
You're doing great over there. We're only a few miles down the road from you.
that's right. Well, I have an assortment of questions. I'm hoping I'm going to be asking the questions that our viewing audience wants to hear about, but I kind of have a hunch that I will because what you're all about is jazz, music, singing, and, lyricism. So we'll just start right at the beginning. I was just thinking the way your music presents itself, there's a lot of variety. And I was actually wondering, this question is for Stacey. Do you have like an assortment of musicians that you would say are your sources of inspiration?
Totally. And it goes back to the earliest days. I'm sure it's the same for you, Todd. There are things that you heard as a kid and they stay with you forever. And
Oh, yeah.
they're the reasons why you enter sometimes onto that path. For me, in my most formative years, I heard Louis Armstrong play and sing Stardust.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was tiny and I just heard that and thought, I want that. I don't know what it is. I wasn't asking questions. I wasn't sort of, a penetrating question asker as a little thing. It's
Right.
emotional. I heard this thing. It moved me to such a place that I knew that that's where I needed to go. And then I think I probably put it in my back pocket because, I was in a family of people who weren't musicians, but I was gathering music along the way. Louis was really early for me. So was Joao Gilberto, who I discovered after Louis. That was more in my teenage years, my early teenage years. But I heard him and I heard that universe and I knew that I needed that too. When I say I needed that, it's not like I knew I was going to be a musician because again,
Right.
I didn't come from a family of musicians. When you say you need something, it was just like, I needed to be in that universe, part of it, whether or not I was playing it, I just needed to be in it. And those were the things that I would say struck me most, but also my mom. I grew up with my parents across from Lincoln Center, which you know
Okay.
well.
Oh, yeah.
And they were classical music lovers. And I grew up hearing a lot of Maria Callas. My mother would put on Maria Callas when I was a little girl. And
Oh,
I heard
nice.
that voice and I just thought, that's incredible. I was so moved by its power, but it's also its fragility. So there are certain markers along the way. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Actually, my next question, it actually kind of bounces off of what you just said about Stardust. There is a lot of chatter on the internet about which version of Stardust is the best version, even among the Louis Armstrong recordings. And if you go online and check out, if you just Google in Stardust, you'll find like two or three versions, and people insisting, no, this is the very, very best version. And I was actually talking to Winston about this because his favorite version actually is not Louis Armstrong, but it's Lionel Hampton, and which is a stellar version. Jim, you may be familiar with that, but he takes a crazy long solo on there, and it just, oh my goodness, just takes the tune to another level.
I think the thing about the Armstrong version is that it's, at least the one that we listen to
Oh, yeah.
on repeat here is that it's such a sort of perfect paraphrase of both
That's
the
right.
lyric and the melody. It's
Yeah.
it's not the version you go to learn the tune. It's not a textbook version, but it has a distillation of all of the feeling and all of the kind of important sort of notes in
That's
the
right.
melody.
That's right. You kind of have to know the tune even, in some ways,
Right.
to really appreciate it fully.
It's a real sort of work of impressionist genius.
It
Oh, yeah.
really is. But the other thing I wanted to say is sometimes your favorite version also has to do on a purely emotional level where you were when you heard
That's
it, or
right.
what you heard first. For me, that version where he opens with the instrumental first and then he goes into the chorus of the vocal, And that's the first one I heard. And I
Okay,
would
yeah.
say to this day, decades later, that still remains for me. If you really pressed me, it's just the best version on the
Yeah,
planet. The one that if I put it on once, I cannot just hear it once. I've got to go back. I soar to another place. Nobody does
that's right.
that for me like that. And so, but because I heard it as a kid and it struck me like that, I think it can't be bettered.
Can't be better than that. Well, that's kind of like there's this question among music educators too about uh, the philosophy of music education, and like there's no answer to some of these questions. Is there, like, is there a need for a music education, a formal music education? Well, there's no real answer because some people were formally trained, some people were not. But there's just this beauty about it. And of course, those versions of Stardust, that, I mean, that does it for me too. I love that. I could just sit and talk about that all day. But I wanted to talk a little bit more, Stacey, a little bit about your years at Sarah Lawrence College. I actually used to live in that area. I used to live in
Oh, really?
Yonkers. Yeah, I was in Yonkers, right close to Riverdale. And so I'm very familiar with that area and Cross Bronx and all that stuff. So tell me about, like, all right, your Sarah Lawrence College experience. I mean, I don't know, was that a music, were you involved in music in any way, or was it pure like
Not,
literature?
not at
Oh,
all.
okay.
So I came from this literary background, which I think really fueled what it is that I do today. I'm
Oh,
glad that I
yeah.
studied the way I studied. And you know what? I would like to just go back a couple of steps to what you just said about education,
Yeah,
because what's so wonderful about the world and all of us meeting as musicians is none of us have the same path in, and there is no right or wrong way.
that's
If
right.
music is your ticket onto the planet, it just is. So whether you're Lester Young and you're sitting listening to those records, or whoever you are, however you got in, it's your way, and it's a legitimate way. For me, I had more of a literary background and a mom who taught, and a real love of literature that I developed as a kid. And also, it wasn't just the literature, it was also the way in which I came to it, which is to say, my mom would sit us down, I had siblings, and we would read aloud to one another. So, for
Okay.
example, there would be a few of us, and we would take turns reading a chapter from a book. And I would read a chapter, and then my sister would read a chapter, every night.
Yeah.
What I learned really early on was the way in which I expressed a story, even though it wasn't my story. It might have been a Charles Dickens novel, it could have been anybody's novel. The way I delivered it was my way. And that was really exciting to me, that we all had our
Oh,
own
yeah.
means of expressing these things just by reading those words on the page. So by the time I got to Sarah Lawrence, my yearning was really to be in a literary world. That's where
Yeah.
I thought I was going. That was my path. I listened to a ton of music. That's what I did. That was my education. After my schoolwork, I would be in my room with my gazillions of records
Oh,
and
yeah.
just listen. So I was developing, certain skills along the way just because it was my joy.
Yeah.
But I had no intention of being a musician. And this is where, as Julia mentioned, the twist of fate, I have to ask myself, and still I do still, had I not gone to Europe
Okay.
and fallen in with the people I did, and ended up staying in New York and getting a job teaching or doing, I was also a language student. So if I had done something with my languages and literature, would I have had a different path completely? Would music have still found me? I just don't know. But
Oh,
because I
yeah.
was away from my family, thousands of miles away, and I think I felt really free to make some
Hmm.
choices. And then I met Jim, and that was so obviously just going to happen. This thing.
You hear that,
Um,
Jim? You started this
Yeah.
mess, man.
so, so the
Yeah.
Sarah Lawrence years were really good years for me in terms of my studies, and I
Yeah.
enjoyed it, and I developed as a musician on the side. But
Right.
I didn't know in those days that I was going to be a musician at all.
Okay. Well, I have a question for you because I was going to ask you guys both about this. It's a kind of striking aspect about your recordings as well as your concerts is the quantity and quality musical compositions, you know, and you guys are, you know, collaborating on lyrics and all that kind of stuff. And so tell me a little bit about how you see words as play. Like, do you conceive of like, do either of you kind of, you get an idea for a tune, a lyric or something, do you kind of just play with it for a while and then go, oh man, that is so fun to say it like that, you know? Uh, is that something that you think about sometimes, or is that you, do you approach it totally different than that? How do you approach
All the time. And I love that you just said that, because sometimes, and I was just saying this to somebody last night, sometimes it's just a word. Sometimes it's
Right.
just one word, like snow or shadow, and I'll just say it out loud. You know, the way I used to read poetry out loud, well, I still do, but just read it aloud because just those words want to be in the air. But to go back to the first part of the question, in terms of how we develop this, you know, again, you don't know why it is you're going to be attracted to a particular aspect of the music. Um, you just find your place, you know, in the same way you guys became horn players and somebody else might have been attracted to a string, and you just don't know. For me, words were so at the center of it. And again, there's no right way. If you watch, let's say, taking another jazz singer, take somebody like Anita O'Day, and you watch Anita O'Day, and I never talked to Anita O'Day, we never crossed paths, but I would guess that she would have said, had we been in conversation, that her place was kind of by the drums. She loved the drummer, she loved the drum, she loved the groove. That's where she wanted to be. She could have sung any words. Not to say that the words didn't matter to her. I don't want to be disparaging about that, but I'm saying
Right.
if you pressed her and said, what's the one thing? She would have said, drums, man, that's where I'm going, right? She's
Oh,
got to stand
yeah.
by there. That's her connection on the stage. That's how I feel about it anyway. And I could be wrong too. We have to make our own presumptions, don't we? For
Yeah.
me, though, it's the words. They're right there. I mean, I love my drums and I love my harmony and all those things, but it's the sound of the words. So when you said that thing about saying them over and over, yeah, I gotta just sing them, speak them,
Right.
hear them out in the world. When we started working with Ishiguro, so this is the turning point to kind of bridge from the sort of American Songbook days into where we are now. I mean, they're all mishmashed together.
Yeah.
But I think early on in my career, I don't want to make it sound like there was a problem, because there wasn't, because I loved my material. I have to love a song and I love it and I sing it to death.
Right.
But I think a few years in, what I'd said to Jim and to Ish, Kazuo Ishiguro, the lyricist. So Jim's writing the songs and Ishiguro writes the lyrics.
Okay.
Ish is a novelist. He's a master of words. It goes without saying. And when we started writing or collaborating, they do the writing, I do the singing. But when we started collaborating, the thing that I said to them was, if we're going to write music for me, what I'm hoping for is a through composed story. So
Okay.
that it's like the lifetime of somebody in a story. And I think I felt, if I'm honest, a little bit boxed in by the formula. There's a reason the formula is there, and there's a reason it works in 32 bar form. Singer sings it, there's an instrumental passage, singer sings it. The reason that works, we don't know, but it just does. It's sublime and it does. But because
It's jazz, man.
it's jazz, and it just works and it feels great. But I
Yeah.
think I felt as a deliverer of lyrics slightly boxed in. And so what I wanted was, if we were going to go further, was a through composed song whereby, like in Breakfast on the Morning Tram, for example, there would be an instrumental passage, but that kind of acted more as a passage of time. It wasn't
Okay.
like singer sings. It was no longer 32 bar form. The form went out the window. Ish was writing the lyrics first. And because they had no form, Jim had to work his way around that, which was at once really challenging and also kind of liberating. And for me, it meant, and for all the band members, it felt like we were kind of all of a sudden on the edge of our seats because we didn't have that formula. Now, we didn't give up the formula. It just meant that when we imposed those songs or included those songs in the repertoire, in a record or on stage, once we got to the next song, like Stardust or I've Grown Accustomed to Space or whatever it was, suddenly that 32 bar form had so much more potency. It had so much more meaning to me because
Right.
the flow, you know, you're an instrumentalist. You guys are
Oh, yeah.
instrumentalists. You have a different set of, you have a different envelope from which to work.
Uh-huh.
You know, you have a different set of parameters. And I think I was looking to maneuver my parameters so there was just a little bit more room within those stories. And so when I sing one of those songs that they wrote for me, I just feel like I can be in this story, like Bullet Train, which lasts for like 6-7 minutes. And then we're back to our American Songbook song. And it just feels so good.
I think the key word is,
I hope I answered that.
You totally did, yeah.
Very good.
and I think the key word in all of that is story as well, because Ishiguro's lyrics are convoluted in a good way, but you know, what I sort of reference them back to is more like Joni Mitchell lyrics, which are kind of episodic.
Right.
There are choruses and there are episodes, and they are extremely visual and poetic. And it's not that they don't have form, but the form is kind of very loose, and the language is not obviously poetic in the way that most song lyrics are obviously poetic. And so it creates a different flavor as well. And it also, kind of not necessarily to do with music, except that it's to do with performance, is that it creates a space in which Stacey is a character that's delivering a story, which is imagined to be autobiographical, so that when you come back to singing a standard song, then there's an established character. So it's not a question of, hi, my name is Stacey Kent, and this is my husband, saxophone player Jim Tomlinson, and we're going to play 10 standards for you, and I'm going to sing it, and he's going to blow some choruses.
That's right.
It becomes much more of a kind of a slightly more kind of complex kind of presentation.
Right.
I know that you have more questions. Can I put a footnote on that one, though?
No, totally. Go for it. I want to hear more about, because you're actually answering my questions as we go along. I want to pinpoint for our audience just so that they understand what you're talking about. A couple of points, but you go.
Just a footnote to that, which is to say, when Jim said about the character, what I love about our genre, and I think this is why I belong in this genre, because I'm not an actress. I don't belong in musical theater. First of all, I have to be in jazz because I love this harmony. This is where I belong. Yeah. But also in terms of the presentation, it fits me because I'm not pretending to be somebody else. I'm not putting on a costume and acting. What I love about this genre is that you can be exactly who you are, right? Some of us are more shy. Some of us are more extrovert. Some of us want to hang by the drums. We're all a little bit different, and you bring your own sensibility and your own personality. So I can sing the exact same repertoire as, you know, one of my fellow singers, you know, like Dinah Krall. We can sing, we can share repertoire, and yet her delivery and my delivery will be completely different because we're just different people.
Yeah,
and
different
so
lived experiences.
Exactly. So that's why, you know, you have a jazz musician writing your compositions, you have a lyricist writing your stories, and then you put the cocktail of your own sensibility and personality into it, and then, you know, presto, you've developed that automatic individual style.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. So I'm amazed at the variety. It's endless, you know, the expression and the variety among musicians as they, you know, do sing the same tunes or you know, maybe different renditions. And what I wanted to get to for our audience is that I don't know if our audience really would understand that musicians sometimes want lyrics to be like spoken language, and it's a thing for vocalists and musicians to sometimes not want the lyrics to follow the spoken language. Like that's a thing where sometimes we purposefully have the lyric follow just the way we would speak it, and then sometimes we actually move away from that purposed type rhythm of the language, you know. And when Jim and I first had an opportunity to meet the other day, I mentioned that to him, and maybe you guys could elaborate on that about the purposeful rhythm of language or the unpurposeful rhythm of language, if you will, and how fun that can be, you know, in terms of adding variety to your presentation.
Yeah. Can I go first?
Of course.
Yeah. I think something I've been carrying around in my back pocket of musical experiences for 40 plus years is that I started out as a musician singing choral music in a church choir, and back in England, and as a chorister you get used to singing the same lyrics set to music by different composers,
right?
And that always fascinated me, how the same words could make you feel it completely different depending on what the music was.
Oh, that's neat.
And I think that made me, when I later in life, as I kind of developed into the musician that I am, that made me always aware in writing and arranging of the relationship between musical setting and lyrics, you know, and to be incredibly and to be intentional about what I was doing in terms of crafting songs. You know, it's not enough just to kind of have a, you know, to write a melody and kind of shoehorn your lyrics into it, and the second verse has to be exactly the same as the
That's
first
right.
because it's just easier that way, because then
That's
you
right.
to write it once. No, it's like you kind of, it's like everything is sort of treated on its own merits.
That's right.
And so a lot of the songs that I write, especially with Ish, but with all my song partners, every single chorus is different.
Okay.
Even though you don't necessarily, they're not sort of grossly different, and they sound like choruses, but they might be different lengths. The rhythms might be different. The melodies might be different.
The dynamics.
Yeah.
You know, there are sort of points of connection. There are kind of hooks that give a sense of coherence and form and shape. But in between those kind of stepping stones of kind of form, I tend to sort of write more freely than otherwise.
Oh, that's neat. I have this illustration that I tell my students about when forming phrases. I say, well, when you play the melody, play it as if you're crossing a stream. You know, like you step on a big stone, you step over here, you almost slip, you do this, you do that, hop, leap, jump, pop, and then you're finally at the other side, you know. But it takes that process to kind of wind through that to get to the desired result, you know. And I think that creates a certain type of personalized expression, you know, because everybody's going to do that differently, obviously, you know. Go ahead, Stacey, you wanted to say something on this.
I did, because I think it also has to do with not just who you are and how you step. I think it has also to do with the conversation. So, for example, taking this away from song for a minute and just go to dialogue between two people.
Right.
So we're only just meeting this week.
Right.
So we have a particular relationship. And maybe I want to tell you something that happened to me today. And I tell it to you in a particular way because of our relationship. I have an intimate relationship with Jim after 30 years, and I might tell him exactly the same story. And the way in which I tell it to him will be in a different way because of this dynamic and how we sit together, or what he says back to me. So you can take the same story and maybe you've already told the story before, but then your mom comes in and you want her to know the story. You're going to tell it to her differently. Every time I sing a lyric, I'm not saying that it's radically different. I mean, these are infinitesimal differences.
Yeah.
But I can sing the same song over and over and over and over again. And I feel like because of the outside, the external elements, right? The room that I'm in, the proximity to the band, the way the audience feels. Maybe I don't see them that well that night, but I feel them. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
Because you're out with your band and you play a particular way, and it makes you tell your same story.
That's right.
Right? With your same notes and your same words in a different way. I think what's key though is I will never, ever, ever try and do it differently. If I think too much, if I want to try and do it differently, that's just silly. Why would I go out of my way to tell the story differently? It automatically will be different.
That's right.
And the difference isn't even the point. You know, it's just that you are swept away by your mood. And I like your imagery of the stream because you don't know what stone's there, right?
That's right.
You're walking down the stream or you're stepping over the stream, and unless you've memorized that path, you don't know. And so you've got to kind of move with it. And so I'm very I just allow myself to be in my zone, hear my lyric. And just last night we were playing through something and we got to a word at the end of the song. And I don't know why, I can't explain it, but I just kind of heard it differently. I sang it differently. It's not that different, but to me, it had all this, I don't know, weight to it. Whatever the word was, I don't know. But, and I thought, wow, I mean, I love that music can just continually surprise you, even being in that same song.
Well, you mentioned proximity. I wanted to talk, I'm going to segue over to France. We're going to France in our conversation because there are a lot of fans who are aware that jazz has a huge following in France. Okay, many of our greatest American jazz musicians had great success in France. Dexter Gordon, Archie Shepp, Sidney Bechet, Josephine Baker, as well as there are tons of musicians in France who are jazz musicians. The Quintet du Hot Club de France, Django Reinhardt, Claude Bolling, you know, we know all these names, Stefan Grappelli. These are just the super popular names, but there's tons, you know, out there now. In your estimation, so what is the connection between jazz and French culture that has worked historically and which has really worked for you? Obviously, something has really clicked for you with French. I mean, maybe other languages too, I don't know, but particularly what I've observed has been French so far.
Well, in terms of what I sing in, I sing in French and I sing in Portuguese. I grew up studying other languages. I studied Latin and German and Italian and French and Portuguese. French is the most natural to me because I don't know if this made its way into the biog or if anybody knows this, but my grandfather grew up in France. And so by the time he got to America, I wasn't born yet. He came here, he married a woman. He always thought he was going to go back to France and he never did. And so it's a famous story in my household when we were growing up. My grandfather didn't really want to be here. And his way of holding on to France was to bring French culture to us. So he taught me a lot about French culture, poetry and literature and movies and music. And so that's how French made its way into my life as a little kid. Once he taught me to speak French, that was the only language we ever spoke in, he and I. He wouldn't speak to me in English. And he taught me to recite. I was tiny. I had a good ear as a kid. That was obvious. I could repeat after him. And so he would say things and I would repeat after him. And I was just his little imitating, mini him. And
did you call him Papa? Say bon, Papa.
Exactly. So
I can vouch for this as well because he was still around when
we met,
when Stacey and I were first together, and he would speak French to Stacey. Also largely on the assumption that I didn't speak French, which I did. But...
He was vetting the new husband.
Oh, nice.
So
That is so cool.
it was just a little relationship in French, and it was like our own little magic language. And he taught me lots of Baudelaire that I would recite to him. And I was way too little to have any understanding of what the meaning was, but I loved the words. I loved the sound.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
and he taught me about Michel Legrand and Léo Ferré. He loved French music.
Yeah.
So that's where the French comes from. And so, a lot of people along the way said, oh, she learned to speak French to go to France and sing in French. And it had nothing to do with my career because this was decades before I was a singer.
So this is really integral. It's like part of the love of your life was French culture as a youngster.
Totally. But you know what's cool about it? Not having grown up in France, but having had all that exposure to it, there was this very cool relationship to the music that I kind of use to my benefit, which is to say that I have these holes in my understanding of the culture because there are things I missed out on. Like I knew Jacques Brel, but I didn't know Barbara. And I heard these songs for the first time and went, what is that? I didn't know if they were new, old, I didn't know anything. And so I really was able to have a kind of a pure relationship to the repertoire. Not all of it, a lot of it I knew it, like Léo Ferré's Avec le temps, which took me a really long time to sing and want to sing because for me, I just had him in my head. But other songs were just brand new, fresh. And so there was a very interesting way in. Again, you can't choose your path. It's just how I learned the music. The way the French, there are these people who say these really silly things along the way sometimes, like, French music doesn't swing. What? It really does.
That doesn't make any sense at all.
It has such a big groove. And I think that it also has to do with their spoken way as well.
Right.
A lot of it has to do with scansion. Portuguese works in its way because of its liaisons and its scansion. French too. I think that, to listen to somebody like Django Reinhardt, and that early French swing, it's a groove that is just part of their culture.
Yeah. It's very clear what it is too. Like I was listening to him recently and I was, this guy was really phenomenal,
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
Go ahead. You were saying something.
No, that's it. I think that to this day, they still, even sometimes inadvertently, even without realizing it, there is a very strong, all those people that you mentioned that bring us to where we are today.
Yeah.
There's a strong connection to the music. And I guess what I'm referring to is, I grew up listening to a lot of jazz without realizing what it was. I didn't know what the word was. But I would go shopping with my mom. It would be in the store and I was attracted to it. And I heard, the Ella records or the Duke Ellington records. I just heard them because they were around. Now my ear was attracted to them. Maybe, and a kid my age might have been more attracted to Pink Floyd. I don't know. But there's a reason why I was listening to it. But it was out there. And if you wanted it, you were exposed to it. And I would say that it's the same way in France. I mean, if you just walk around as you do and you hear it and you hear what's going on in the shops and the restaurants, it's just out there. It is very much part of their culture.
Yeah.
And
so
you mentioned Josephine Baker. And it's
from St. Louis. Whoa, yeah.
there's a similar thing as well with the UK. But, a lot of American musicians were going over to Europe as early as the 20s, and Brazilian musicians like Pixinguinha were going over to Paris, we're going over to London and bringing that kind of hot style of music to European dance audiences.
Right.
That's right.
And, there was a lot of crossover between the European bands and the American bands and exchange of ideas and so on. And, it left its mark, on those European music scenes.
Baden Powell in Paris, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very open to music from outside of their culture, at the same time loving their own French music culture. They're a really interesting mix.
That's really cool. Yeah. Because I know the times that I've been in Europe, when we actually played a French tune, people love it. They just think that, wow, it's a big compliment, you know.
Yeah.
I was curious, have you guys ever played the New Morning Jazz Club?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've done that one. Okay,
yeah.
I have great memories about that. The first
Yeah.
time I ever went to Europe, I was a teenager in high school, and we did the New Morning Jazz Club. I was thinking, wow, that's really cool, you know.
It is
But that's
cool.
actually been a
Yeah.
hot spot for many years, and they have all sorts of acts there. I
Yeah.
do want to ask you something before we're going to go to listener questions in just a moment, but I have to ask you this. Agua de Marzo. You guys recorded that, and of course the original Jobim tune is in Portuguese. How did the translation work for that? I'm just noticed when you sang that, I was thinking, man, she does not miss a beat with that thing. And did you have to change a lot, or was that did it just kind of smoothly fit in there? Like, how did the lyrics fit with that tune into French? Because the way you sing it, it sounds like it was composed in French.
Well, it's the brilliance of Jobim, because
That's
he's written
amazing.
this song, the song, for everybody knows this song, it's a trance, right? And it's just going, do, do, do. You're hypnotized, right? But then
Yeah.
you've got this list. It's a list song, right? The list of the nouns. And it is the brilliance of Jobim. He wrote, some people may not know this, that Jobim wasn't just the composer, but sometimes he wrote the lyrics himself. Sometimes they were Vinicius
Okay.
Moraes, he had lots of partners, but he also was a poet. And in fact, we have one on our wall over there. Well, you can't see it from here, but it's in our
Okay.
home all the time. Anyway, he wrote the lyric in Portuguese, Águas de Março, and he also wrote the English lyric, Waters of March.
Oh, wow.
He
Okay.
gave it to his friend, Georges Moustaki, to translate it for him into the French, because Jobim didn't speak French, or maybe, a little French, but he didn't feel that was his to do. So Moustaki did it for him.
And Georges Moustaki, while we're sort of, being multicultural, was a Greek guy who moved to Paris, became Edith Piaf's lover, and,
Oh, wow.
And songwriter.
and songwriter, a singing star in his own right. He wrote Mon Homme,
Yes.
my man.
My man,
And-
yeah.
Yeah.
He also translated the Chico Buarque,
Oh yes. Partager les fesses.
Partager les restes, which we played with him.
Mm.
Wow.
That
That's-
song, yeah, that's cool, right?
There's a huge connection there.
That was,
Edith
and it
Piaf
all
and-
comes full circle,
That is fascinating. I
lineage.
love that.
right? It's the 6 degrees up. Anyway, Jobim wrote that, gave it to Moustaki to translate for him. It's slightly different in the French, ever
Okay.
so slightly, because not because of the scansion. The scansion really works well.
Okay.
Une pierre, un chemin qui chemine, un resto de récit.
But there's an extra 4
It's-
bars somewhere
Yeah.
in the version.
So-
So I've done. I mean, we do them all in the live show, not
I see,
not
yeah.
simultaneously or back to back or anything. But yeah, I hadn't
Little
I ca-
maneuvering.
I kind of hadn't really noticed. I hadn't really clocked it. I did a different arrangement because, the song is based around a sort of 1-1-7-4 minor,
Okay.
with
Yeah,
all
yeah.
kinds of variations and inversions and so on.
Yes, exactly.
And
yeah.
and the melody is extremely repetitive, but there are
Right.
little
But the
twists
little
and turns.
subtleties, though,
Yeah.
the little
Yeah.
subtleties, it's like
And-
what makes
and
it a.
those
Yeah.
those twists and turns and subtleties are different in all of the versions.
That is
So,
amazing.
so the Portuguese one is its own thing, the English one is its own thing, and the French
Okay.
one is its own thing. So we have 3 different arrangements.
And it can do the head in. It can.
Wow.
You
You got to really concentrate. Huh?
It's a concentration game. It's
Wow.
totally being in that zone. And also then you've got have you heard the João Gilberto, the version? He's done a few versions, but there's the one where he does just as a solo thing, just him and guitar.
No,
And
I haven't
he
heard that.
cuts out some bars and he shortens some phrases. And again, it's like the Armstrong, it's like the Stardust thing. Don't
Yeah.
learn it from that version, but
That's
check
right.
it out because it's awesome.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's just joy. I mean,
Oh.
he's such a genius, Joe.
That's right.
And
Well,
it's
our listening audience has to check that out. I don't know if everybody's who's watching us knows what we're talking about, but Agua de Marzo. is a song by Antonio Carlos Jobim. It has been wildly successful, widely popular. Everybody should go check that out. And you should check out Stacey Kent's version en français. Oui, c'est français.
Thank you.
I think that's actually a good point for us to segue to some audience questions. Julia's hanging by.
I am.
And she's got some questions for us from our viewing audience. And what you got, Julia?
We've got questions and comments. I just want to read a couple of the comments coming in on Facebook. Richard is so excited because he and his friend Jennifer are going to see you March 10th in Orange County, California.
Oh,
Okay.
And I think he's seen you before. He saw you right before the pandemic in March of 20 as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hey,
And then
Richard.
I've learned a new word, and I think they used it because it's a British word. Andrea is joining us right now. She said she just tuned in from Japan, and she loves what you're talking about. And she says she's so chuffed.
Oh, she's chuffed.
And I had to Google it to look it up. It means really happy and excited.
It's such a good word.
Yeah.
We should all use that word. It's
Oh,
great.
yeah.
I learned it
So
from
I had
this.
not heard that word. Okay, we do have a few questions. If you're joining us on Facebook, feel free to put them in the comments, and I'll keep looking. If I look down, I'm looking at Facebook. And then if you're on Zoom, please put them in the Q&A, and that helps us keep track of them. All right, our first one up says from Jolie. She'd love to know what song Stacey loves but hasn't performed live in a very long time.
Okay, so this is a longer list than usual because we had 2 years off during the pandemic.
Yeah, of course.
And so we were all home playing, going, God, I just want to play, right? Singing alone in our rooms, playing alone in our rooms, that kind of thing. What haven't I done in a long time? Top of the list. Oh, come on, Stace, faster.
What haven't you done ever?
What haven't I done ever that I love?
Yeah. Well, we just
I think we've stumped you.
here's the thing. We just
Stumped.
Yeah, we have a Patreon page, and we do home recordings for our patrons.
That's true.
I play guitar to accompany Stacey.
And on there, we play songs that we've never recorded or never played live. We just dig into, people send us requests. So we play things and we go, oh my God, I love that. We just did Garden in the Rain, which is such a good song. Never did it. Shadow of Your Smile, we did. Just tons.
My Funny Valentine, we did for
Where or When, we did. So
Oh, yeah.
The thing is, in answer to this question, Jolie, it's really hard to say one. The list just goes on and on. You can keep finding songs. People write in and they say, have you done this? Would you do this? So we take these requests and we do them. And suddenly you go, oh, you did one for me. There was a song called I Have the Feeling I've Been Here Before. And Jim knew it. I didn't know it. And it was on the piano. And I went, oh my God, this song is great. It's so exciting that you can continually find songs. It can't be infinite, but it sure feels it.
That's right.
That's great. That's great. We've got a few comments and we've got several more questions. One person says they think it's delightful that you all call a Nobel laureate Ish.
He likes to be called Ish, by the way. He doesn't, he'll say, if you meet him, he'll say, call me Ish within the first few. So
That's funny.
yeah.
And then Jerry is sad that you've moved away from England. So that's just a comment there.
Sorry, Jerry. We'll be back. We'll be in Ronnie Scott's in June.
Right.
But boy, are we loving Virginia.
I bet.
Oh.
We have Thomas, and I'm sorry, Thomas, if I mispronounce your last name, Kuneth. And apparently he writes, he has a website, Jazz History Online. And he says, it's good to see you again. And he hopes that you saw that your latest album appeared on his best of 2021 list.
Oh, thank you.
And he says it was such a surprise to note the differences between the live gig at Birdland and the album. Just a comment.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Okay. So I guess he's referring to, we did Birdland in September with the new album, Songs from Other Places. Now, I will just say very quickly, because I know we have a lot of questions, but that was the first time that we were on stage in 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And so, boy, was it different. I mean, I will say, and I don't know how it was for you, Todd, for us, we were talking to our musicians about this, to be off and just play at home and then launch back into the world in front of people was so human and so intense. But I mean, I had this out of body experience. I don't even know how to explain it. It was so weird.
Yeah.
And you were on crutches.
Oh, and I was on crutches because I had just ruptured my Achilles tendon. So the gig was, I mean, it was.
Julie was in the club.
But the live gig was so live.
Right.
I mean, it was wild, and it felt to me like we were playing our album there with these people in the room. But anyway,
I don't know what you think, Todd, but I mean, I ski. It feels like I used to ski, but there's no skiing in Virginia. Well, there is, but not really. And
not like out west.
And it's a seasonal thing, and you can do whatever conditioning you want to do between seasons. There is no conditioning for skiing that doesn't involve skiing.
No, the hill is gonna.
and
there's no conditioning for a gig
other than doing gigs.
That's right.
You know, you can kind of play and you can take care of your chops and you can practice and you can do all of that, but when you get out onto the stage, that's right. A different thing.
That's right. I was saying that to a friend of mine this very day. About how even though you practice a certain way, it's not the same as responding to somebody live at a gig, you know. The intensity, the endurance. Woo,
Whoa.
Like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan, you know, until you get punched in the face.
The endurance is huge, and it's not just the physical endurance, it's the mental endurance.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, I was practicing gigs at home, I will say, but actual gigs. Like I put an iTunes list together of what I would have done on a gig.
Sure.
And I didn't, interrupt myself. I listened to the solos of the band, and then I would sing, and I just tried to be in a gig. But endurance, not until you get out there.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, let's see if we can we've got a few more questions and quite a few comments. Larry wants to know, is there a personal story associated with the great tune Changing Lights?
Well, when we met Ish, one of the first things he said to me, I mean, we've been friends for 20 years now, but one of the first things he said when we met, and we weren't talking about writing music together, we were just talking about anything and everything. And one of the things I think we connected on was, he said, I see you as a traveler, literally, metaphorically. I see you as out in the world and not grounded anywhere. And I think the reason he was so perceptive about this is because Ish's family left Japan when he was tiny. I think he was under 10. And his father was a researcher in England. And he was supposed to go to England for a very short amount of time and then go home. So Ish grew up in England, studying in England, had all his formative years there, but there was almost like this suitcase at the door. And so he was never really in England, but he never went home to Japan until he ended up going to college and grew up in Japan, in England, and never went home. Right? So he knew it for the first 9 years of his life, and it just kind of fell into the background. This is why I think the man is so incredibly perceptive about people and where they are, literally and metaphorically, in the planet. And he saw me as that kind of a traveler, a little bit out in the world and not so grounded. And so this takes me back to the Changing Lights. He writes these stories about these protagonists in one part of their life, and then another, and then another. This is what we were talking about earlier, Todd.
Yeah, that's right.
Sort of full lifetime in a story.
Yeah.
And so he writes these stories for me with the sensibility of this person in his head. And that's, we don't make a plan about the story. We just let him go. And then he hands them to Jim. And Jim, the lyric comes first, as we said earlier.
Right.
And then he writes I say them out loud to Jim. So I would read the lyrics to The Changing Lights, for example, and Jim would kind of hear the scansion of the song from that. I record them for him, read aloud, and then he goes away and writes the song. And this is how it's always worked with Ishiguro on the Tomlinson Ishiguro songs. So it's not like I can really give a story to The Changing Lights, except that this man, this person, this writer hears this protagonist, whoever he kind of wants me to be. And the stories are very often, not always, but very often painful, sad stories about the end of a love, let's say, or just something that's missing in somebody's life. But there's always this little sense of hope. And that's the kind of, I think, what Tomlinson Ishiguro give me in Changing Lights especially, which I think might be my favorite Tomlinson Ishiguro. There's this little ... There's this little to be continued, and you don't know where it's going. And I love that they leave that door open.
There's one more thing about Isha's lyrics, which is a little bit different, more like singer-songwriter type approach, which is that when you have the first person in an American Songbook lyric, I love you. The I could be anyone, really. It's like anyone can sing that song and be that first person. Right. When Isha's lyrics come out, talking about The Changing Lights, for instance, were we leaving Rio? Were we in New York? I remember Bossa Nova on the breeze. That's a very very sort of personal recollection that you're creating. So you're creating character in that. So it sounds like it kind of sounds like it's a singer-songwriter lyric writing from personal experience, and yet all the while kind of weaving this kind of story about something which is universal, which is the process of sort of growing up, the changing sort of perspective on how you view the world as you go through the decades. So
yeah, it's like a diary, like reading somebody's diary or something.
Yeah,
you know?
It is. It's
And,
really well put.
Well, let me throw out a couple of comments, and then we have time for one more quick question, maybe.
Okay.
So I just wanted,
Sounds
this
good.
just proves your mass appeal. So we have Larry saying, not a question, but a plea. Please come to Plano, Texas. And then we have somebody else, a Boaz, says that they have a great performance hall in Roanoke, Virginia. Would love for you to come to the Jefferson Center. We have somebody else who's saying that they are so excited because they're going to get to see you twice within a few days, once in Des Moines and the other in the Dakota in Minnesota.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Oh, nice.
We've got people from all over singing your praises. Now, this last question, I don't know. I don't speak French at all, so I am going to just murder this pronunciation. It says, I just saw Les Demoiselles
Les Demoiselles
de Cherbourg.
Roquefort.
de
Oh,
Roquefort.
Roquefort.
Yeah.
Okay,
Cherbourg,
that.
Cherbourg.
Yeah.
For the first time, it was amazing at how packed the French lyrics were to this classic Michel Legrand songs. This seems not to occur as often in English lyric styles, or am I mistaken?
Well, it depends on the writer. I mean, you know, Legrand is a really dense writer, and he did that very purposefully, not all the time. I mean, if you think about something like, what are you doing the rest of your life? Que feras-tu? It is not that way at all. That was written very specifically as a sung/spoken musical. So that and Umbrellas of Cherbourg are very purposefully dense, as all the dialogue is, you know, sung. So
right.
it's an example.
It's much more like opera.
It's like an opera. Yeah.
It's part of the effect as well.
It is.
It results in you feeling a certain way.
Yeah.
And writers intentionally do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and one last comment. Vicky says she loves the art on your wall. So,
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. It's part of the Tilson Mantra series.
well, we want to thank both of you and, of course, Todd for joining us tonight. This has been just fascinating for me, and I know for everyone else. I do want, before we say goodbye, I do want to mention we have one more Jazz Talk this season, and that is with Matthew Whitaker. So I just want to tell you a little bit about him. That'll be on April 12th at 7 p.m. Rising star Matthew Whitaker is a musical prodigy who, although he's only 20 years old, has been performing in the public eye for more than a decade at venues including the Apollo Theater, Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, and the Kennedy Center. Blind since birth, he plays not only the piano, but the organ and drums, and has appeared on the Today Show, the Ellen DeGeneres Show, and 60 Minutes. His third album, and the latest album, Connections, features cameos by Christian McBride, Regina Carter, and John Batiste, with original tunes and interpretations of classics from musical heroes, including Duke Ellington, Stevie Wonder, Chick Corea, and Thelonious Monk. So his Jazz Talk will be April 12th. You'll be able to join us again for free on Zoom or on Facebook. And that precedes his performance at the Palladium on April the 20th. Mm-hmm. But before that happens, of course, all of you who are going to other places to see Stacey and Jim, you need to come to Carmel, Indiana, to the Palladium,
the
Center
beautiful
for the Performing
venue.
Arts, and check us out. It is a beautiful venue. And Stacey and Jim, I can't wait to meet you in person. And
we're so excited. This was so much fun. And I want to just do, if I may, a little tiny shout out, because at the bottom of our screen, we're seeing names pop up. And so we recognize a lot of people who've come in who are just fans and friends that we see out in the world. Like, I just want to give a little shout out to Doreen. We always see you in New York. And lots of familiar names that we know from Facebook. And thank you guys so much for being here and part of this too. And thank you guys for inviting us. Todd, it was so much fun to talk to you.
Yeah, it was a delight to talk to you guys.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Very good.
Well, from the Center for the Performing Arts, and for Stacey and Jim and Todd, we thank you all for joining us tonight. And we do hope to see you at this center sometime soon. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you guys.
Have a good night, everybody.
What a fun night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.